Well, good morning or good evening, depending on where you are in the world today, and welcome to DataBank's webinar. I'm Dane Dittamore, Solutions Marketing Director at DataBank, and I'll be your host. First off, we trust you and your families are safe and well during these very challenging times. I know we're all hoping for a safe and a short recovery, not only from the health crisis, but the business disruption as well. We think you'll find this webinar both relevant and timely. I don't think any of us had a pandemic in our 2020 business plan, and we all seem to be struggling with the increase in ransomware attacks. That said, we still have to keep our applications and our business up and running so we can take care of our families, and of course, you need to make sure you're open for business, and that's why we're here today. I'm honored to introduce today's speakers. First off, we have Anthony Spiteri. Anthony is Senior Global Technologist with Veeam. Anthony is joining us live from Australia, and we're very lucky to have him because he's 12 hours ahead of us, ahead of East Coast US, and of course, we're interrupting a good night's sleep for him. Secondly, we have Mark Haupt. Many of you are familiar with Mark, DataBank's Chief Information Security Officer. Mark's many years of experience extend beyond security and compliance to include data protection, which is an important part of the ransomware conversation we're having today. As for the agenda, I'll kick us off by talking a little bit about the DataBank Veeam partnership and managing risk, which should provide some context. Anthony will then discuss Veeam technology and the Veeam Cloud Data Management Platform. And then Mark will then discuss some of the healthy habits we should be practicing from the CISO's perspective. And we'll round out the discussion with Mark and I both sharing how DataBank can help. And finally, we'll give our audience an opportunity to ask questions, which we will field via chat. A couple of housekeeping items. First off, everyone should all have access to chat, so be thinking of questions you want to ask and enter those into chat at any time during the presentation. And secondly, while we don't anticipate any connectivity issues, these things, of course, do happen. And we know you're likely to be working from home, so you might have childcare issues, interruptions from your pets, or other interruptions. And of course, in that case, should you need to drop early and would like us to follow up, please send a note to webinars@databank.com. For those of you that can stay with us for the entire session, we have a couple of exclusive offers that you'll want to hear about. Now, before we get started on the details, I think it's important for us to talk about the strength of the partnership that exists between DataBank and Veeam. We often hear it takes a village, and what DataBank and Veeam together in partnership, that's what we bring to you. We bring the village, so to speak. We're two industry leaders that together deliver proven protection as a service that's secure, compliant, and holistic. And although the numbers you see here are significant, the important takeaway is that you benefit from our collective scale and expertise. DataBank has the geographically diverse data centers and storage to back up to and recover from. And Veeam's software platform is undeniably the best in the industry at managing backup and recovery. The two of us, together in partnership, provide not merely products and services, but holistic solutions. And in this case, with DataBank and Veeam, the whole is truly greater than the sum of the parts. Now, DataBank is a Veeam cloud service partner, provider partner. So our data protection solutions are powered by Veeam technology, and you can rest assured that we are experts in this technology. And in addition, it's important to note that together we provide the essential parts of a total solution that you'll need to effectively combat ransomware. Now, before we get into the details of the technology, let me start by putting this into context that we can all relate to. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world today, but there are many similarities and parallels between today's topic and the health crisis. There's lots of talk about vaccines, cures, when to open, how to open. We all have our own perspective depending on who we are and where we're from. But the one common thread really comes back to managing risk. From a personal health standpoint, if we're concerned about getting sick, but especially if we think it could be the end of us, we'll do whatever we can to protect ourselves and our family, right? We know we need to exercise and eat healthy, take our vitamins. In short, take care of ourselves like our doctor recommends. This is how we mitigate illness or risk. Likewise, when we do get sick, we seek help. Ideally, we want a cure, but when there is no cure for what ails us, we seek medicine to comfort us or doctors and nurses to help us. This is how we remediate. Listed here are a few of the similarities. First off, this one is serious. Ransomware can put you out of business. Secondly, there are many unknowns with this COVID, many unknowns with the virus, and of course, many unknowns with ransomware. And it always seems to be changing and morphing and just very hard to pin down. And of course, there's many types of viruses and lots of ways these malicious attackers can hold your data for ransom. And of course, ransomware affects everyone. Like COVID-19, it doesn't discriminate. Ransomware affects everyone and none of us is immune from it. And finally, we need to know. We need to know so that we can remain calm during this crisis. We need to know what's in place now. How and when can we create a plan? Can we create something as close to a cure as possible? How can we protect ourselves now? What does the new normal look like for our business? And of course, if I'm protected now, does that mean I'm going to be okay later? So enough of the gloom and doom. We've got enough of that, right? We could use a little bit of positivity. So on a positive note, let me just say that we are all going to get through this together and help is on the way. So next, Anthony is going to take us through a little history of Veeam and the Veeam technology. Anthony?
All right, hopefully you guys can hear me. Good morning, good afternoon. Can we just confirm that? Because we had a few issues this morning with Zoom.
I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Beautiful, excellent, working beautifully. That's a great start. That's positive in itself. Hello, everybody, and thanks to DataBank for letting me come in and speak to you guys again from all the way in Perth, Western Australia. My role at Veeam is one that's intrinsically together with our service provider community. I used to work in a service provider that was a Veeam cloud service provider, similar to DataBank, offering the services. So my history is rich with Veeam cloud services, and now obviously in the product strategy team, working with our great providers like DataBank that are offering services and technologies based on Veeam. And, with that, if I think about the way that Veeam has evolved, obviously these times are a bit crazy, like we started off with, right? We understand that 2020 hasn't turned out the way it was kind of planned, but, in the lead up to this, what we can see with regards to the technology that Veeam had is that we've worked with our service providers like DataBank for a number of years. And if we look all the way back in 2008, some 12 plus years ago, when Veeam first launched our Veeam backup replication product, we had the ability to offer services that our service providers were identifying and able to latch onto to provide what back then was very early mitigation strategies against things like ransomware, things like data loss. But back then in 2008, 2010, it was very embryonic in terms of the way that organizations were attacked or compromised. Certainly, as we've moved along through the timeline, Veeam has released a number of innovation points and leading innovation points that are leading the market, which our service providers have been able to latch onto and offer services on. So, I think as everything has evolved, obviously when we look at where things were 10 years ago, we understood that data was critical, but as we've moved into the last decade and we've entered 2020, data has become even more critical, but not only critical, but it has to be protected, okay? And this is going to be the recurring theme of this webinar. Once I stop talking, once I go over the Veeam vision, you're going to hear some great information about, some tips on how you mitigate against ransomware, what you do to, use the tooling that's available between a partnership like Veeam and DataBank to make you guys feel safer in these times as we move forward. So suffice to say, 12 years of innovation. If I could go to the next slide, please. Can I get someone to click through the next slide? Cheers. All right, so, that's our innovation. Let's look at the technologies that we've, been able to come to the party with regards to our Veeam backup replication platform, which is the core of our platform. And, now more than ever, Veeam is actually more a platform than ever before. So for those that don't know about Veeam too much, I'm assuming a few of you guys that are on the call are already Veeam customers leveraging DataBank for some Veeam services. But for those that might not know about where Veeam is at the moment, we have a true cloud data management platform now, starting with backup and replication, always at the core. Very important to be able to get your backup and replication done. And we're actually the first vendor to have backup and replication in the one product for the same price. So pretty important there that you get both of those. We then have orchestration, and orchestration is important because it allows our service providers to tap into the platform in repeatable ways, which offers you guys more value in the products that they offer. Monitoring and analytics is huge when talking about a cloud data management platform, underpinned with storage APIs that effectively add agnosticity to our platform, which means that we give our partners like DataBank the freedom of choice to decide what hardware they actually run their data protection services off. And that's important because, obviously from a DataBank perspective, they have their favorites and they have their trusted partners, and that universal storage API lets them leverage that without being locked in to a certain extent. And then at the top there, we've got the cloud, the SaaS, virtual and physical, and we'll tap into that in the next slide into what that means. Can we go to the next slide? So breaking that out, what we're seeing now is obviously when we talk about cloud, SaaS, virtual and physical, we understand that workloads are distributed now more than ever on different platforms. And I think the next slide will touch on that even more and we'll extrapolate on it. But suffice to say, with the platform that's there and the ecosystem of partners that exist, Veeam is ready to basically, take the next step with our partners. And as we look at the cloud data management platform, this is something that is central to everything that Veeam does from a vision perspective. And it all starts with your data, and your data is very important. And that's a constant theme that you'll hear. You heard it at the start, and you'll hear it now, and you'll hear it towards the end of this particular webinar. But the point here is that we believe that your data should be always your data, no matter what. No matter where that data is born, no matter where it's created. And traditionally, private cloud was where most of the data was created. The virtualization world came in and people were able to, take that workload and move it from, on-premises locations to actual data centers. But now more than ever, we understand that we're very much in the era of the hybrid cloud, which extends that data into that public cloud. And the public cloud to many people is, someone like AWS or Azure. But from my point of view, from my perspective, the public cloud includes guys like DataBank as well. So this is the true hybrid model, which has been talked about for a number of years, and it's kind of where the industry is settled. Data created anywhere, that is holistically yours. And again, when we look around the outside of this cloud data management vision, it all starts with backup and recovery. We've talked about that. You've got to have strong backup, strong recovery, especially when you're talking about ransomware mitigation. Being able to recover quickly and efficiently after having that backup in place is very important. As we move around, governance and compliance is something that's important. GDPR in Europe kind of set the tone for what followed. It was obviously regulatory compliance around the world, but GDPR certainly put a spotlight on it and made it a lot more relevant for providers like Veeam to offer it as a first-class citizen when we're talking about our strategies. I've mentioned orchestration, automation, very important there. Again, it's all about creating repeatable code and repeatable actions that providers can offer to make your services run more smoothly. Monitoring and analytics we've talked about, but then cloud mobility. And cloud mobility is important because when you talk about cloud mobility, it's the ability to back up a workload, have it running and stored in those backup repositories, but then being able to shift it and to make it portable, okay? And that all goes back to the fact that your data is your data and it shouldn't be locked in. So a cloud data management platform not only needs accountability for the fact that the data is your data, but you need to have portability and mobility in that particular data as well. And that all helps when dealing with ransomware and whatnot as well. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, just break this out. If you go to break out the points, please. So in terms of resiliency against ransomware, we're going to go into this a little bit, or Mark's going to go into this a little bit later on, but effectively education is important. It's not all about just the backup and recovery implementation. End users need to be educated, and that'll be built out and touched upon a bit later on as well. It's not only the fact that you have education of users, but also administrators. That is the IT system that actually goes, the IT administrators that are administrating these platforms on premises for customers' perspective, but also your users. You have to be able to educate them. The threat is without question real. And this is an actual excerpt from our Veeam Cloud and Service Provider portal, which is a forum that we have. And on this forum, we get daily notes of potential ransomware attacks that have been thwarted due to Veeam software being in place. And if a customer has been unlucky enough to be hit, Veeam software, together with our partners, managing that software and overarching the technology, they're going to be able to allow you guys to recover. So we have a SWAT team. If we go to the next slide, we thought it'd be interesting to put a bit of a quote from one of our SWAT team. The SWAT team basically operates and works with our customers to try and mitigate data and mitigate ransomware attacks. So here's some advice from Veeam support from Tim. I know Tim personally, he's a great guy. So in terms of educating, and we're going to reaffirm this message later on as well when we go into the DataBank portion of this webinar a little bit later on. But effectively, it's just saying that you have to educate the end user about what ransomware is and how to avoid it at that user level. Because you can have the best backup software, the best replication, the best strategies in place, but the weakest point of your network, of access to your data, is the typical end user. So we can't say that enough, and Veeam totally believes that. And DataBank will talk about that a little bit later on. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, just loading through. The latency is there. All right. So again, we've just talked about the basic training for your end users, because like many people know, you can be as diligent as you want, but your front lines need to be strengthened. And as you can see, many people have seen this now. We've all had examples land in our inbox. I mean, that example there of an email that looks legit, that looks like it's from Amazon, asking you to basically check and confirm that it is you. Once you click a link there, you're basically compromised. And not only you, but depending on what type of ransomware or malware or malicious code is linked to this phishing attack here, it could basically compromise the whole business. So again, like I said, your weakest point is the end user. If the end users don't get educated, that is a problem. And we'll discuss that a little bit later on. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so just to finish off my little bit here, here's a few tools with regards to, being able to educate. These are ways to simulate assets and simulate the risk of phishing attacks. These guys actually run some services. It's actually a really good test. And from this point of view, you can actually go and speak to your end users, run them through some tests that they might not even know they're being tested, just to see how much education they do need otherwise. So again, we're really trying to sort of say that while you might have great backup software, you might have great partner like DataBank protecting your data, you still got to know about that end user and make sure that they're fully educated. So let's just go to the next slide. So just click on next. All right. So again, just in terms of a little bit of a strategy around ransomware, layered defense is important. And with a layered defense, we're really trying to say that there is no one magic bullet. And again, it's a series of implementation steps that you guys put into play to put in place a strong defense against something like a ransomware attack. And if we go to the next slide, I think one of the biggest things which you may or may not know of is the 3-2-1 rule of backup. So the 3-2-1 rule of backup is 3 different copies of your data, 2 different media, and one of which is offsite. And the one that's offsite is critical. Okay, now that offsite hopefully is with a partner like DataBank, who offer, Cloud Connect backup. They have other technologies to basically get that data offsite. When you take it offsite, it then to a certain extent becomes separate from the network. Okay, if something happens locally, that separate copy which is offsite will, in theory, not be compromised. Now, it still could be, and there are measures in place. We talked about a layered defense. You could look for a service that includes some sort of immutability. You could look for a service that has some sort of tape out, which basically create virtual air gap backups without the notion of a true air gap solution. So it's important there just to consider that one. You might see the 0 there, and that's an interesting one. That's an extension of the 3-2-1 rule. The 0 is more about validation of your backups, okay? Can you actually recover the backups when you need it? And there's nothing worse than being able to, go to your backups platform, initiate a restore, no matter where the data is being stored, and then find that you cannot restore it. Okay, the only way to basically work without that happening is to validate the backup. And Veeam technology has that inside there. It has validation techniques. It's got something called Data Labs, which will validate your backup on premises. But then also partners like DataBank can look to offer services that offer that validation as well. Can we go next, please? Okay. Just loading up. The 600.
It needs to travel halfway around the world, so it might take a second or two.
Veeam has had logic in it for the past 3 years to help detect against ransomware activity. So this is layered defenses that we're talking about. Not only having the ability to back up and restore in the case of a ransomware attack, but how could you potentially mitigate against something happening? Understanding the pointers to an attack taking place. That allows you to recover quickly. So again, this is like a layered approach to it. And with Veeam 1, what we have is the ability to look at systems and then see if there are some markers in place that are abnormal. What happens with a ransomware attack? Typically, files are getting encrypted. That level of encryption requires high CPU and high disk usage. Okay. Now, what we've done in Veeam 1 is added logic in there which looks for that, and if there's any abnormal activity that spikes up, it's going to give you guys a warning. So it's a pretty cool tool and a pretty cool addition to Veeam 1. In our newest version, which is V10, which launched a couple of months ago of Veeam 1, we actually added some logic to look at the incremental size of backups as well. Because if you remember, what I mentioned is that when a ransomware attack happens, what will actually take place is that your files will be encrypted. And because of encrypted, they've changed. Therefore, on the next backup, you're going to get a larger incremental size as well. So, if you haven't detected it because the CPU hasn't spiked or you haven't had some sort of warning there, you're going to see it with regards to an incremental backup being larger than the next day or the previous days. So that's just some more logic that we've built in there. So if you guys aren't using Veeam 1, it's something to look at. That absolutely helps with ransomware. Okay. I talked about air gap backups before. And with 3-2-1 rule, I talked about offline, immutable, and air gaps, okay? Offline copies are easy. I mean, offline copies typically stem from on-premises locations or services that can be offered. But when we talk about an offline copy, it's like taking a backup and putting it into a repository that might be on a external hard disk. You then take that hard disk and literally take it offline, take it off the network. Okay. When we talk about immutable, we have technology that works with Amazon S3 at the moment, which leverages object lock to basically make every new backup immutable. And when you have immutability in your backups, it typically means that no system or people can actually change that data. So from a ransomware perspective, from a malicious user intent, having something that's immutable is very important. And then air gaps. Air gaps, as I mentioned before, is really about disconnecting an on-premises location, so separating the users from the management plane, from the backup plane, and then where you store your backups. If you have those air gaps, you're going to mitigate the ability of ransomware or malicious users to come in and do damage at some level. Okay, they might do damage at one particular layer, but they'll get stopped if you have air gap backups. So that's another great way to look at it. And I'm sure DataBank can probably talk around that a little bit later on as well. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
All right, thank you, Anthony, for the wonderful introduction to Veeam and also how we can defend against ransomware. My name is Mark Haupt. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at DataBank. What I want to do is I want to help walk you through some of the healthy habits that you can use to help defend against a ransomware type of attack or really any type of malicious attack. So one of the first things I want to take a look at is how do we prepare for a situation like this? You know, a lot of people believe that the situations, the ransomware type of situations, are things that you cannot prepare for because they show up out of nowhere. But I personally do not believe that, and I've seen that those who are unprepared in the manner in which we're going to talk about here are the ones who are the hardest hit. I've seen people where they've completely lost their business as a result of being unprepared, where those people that are prepared are able to return to business literally within hours. So one of the biggest keys to being prepared for a ransomware or any type of malicious attack at all is to have an incident response plan in place. Now, a lot of people believe that an incident response plan is a script and you have to follow it letter by letter and not item by item, number by number. And that's what we need to get in the mindset that the incident response plan is not that kind of script. It is more of a guide, a checklist, if you will. Keep in mind, you know, that pilots, they fly, and when they fly, so they have a checklist on their knee pad or on their iPad sitting on the window next to them. And these are the types of things that they use, and they talk to one another, and they make sure that these checklists are taken care of. But the incident response plan is similar to that in that when an incident occurs and it's activated, you can go down the list and say, okay, have we began communication? Have we started to isolate the situation? Are we in a particular phase? One of the key pieces of the incident response plan is defining what phases you are in and what kind of chaos you may have. So an incident response plan is very important. There are many different templates for incident response plans that are out there. One of them that you can download from the National Institutes of Science and Technology, NIST, or the FedRAMP.gov website will give you a great template for incident response plan. Now, once you have your plan, you can't just write that plan and set it on the shelf and pretend like it's only going to be used when an attack occurs. In order for it to be truly effective, you need to train and make people aware of it. You need to make people aware of where they can go get it. They need to understand who is in charge and the incident commander, and they need to understand what their role is within that plan. So make sure that you plan, you train the plan, as we say, and that you make sure that people understand what their roles and responsibilities are. Now, there's another aspect to conducting training and awareness as well, and that is on an ongoing, not just security awareness training, but ongoing phishing and overall ransom awareness training. Even if somebody's not part of the incident response plan, they need to know how to detect those kinds of messages like Anthony showed you a few moments ago that reportedly came from Amazon, but if you looked a little closer, was not the case. So the more people that are trained, the more people that are aware of the kinds of messages that come in, the more detection that is going to occur and the more prevention that's going to occur. As a matter of fact, just this very morning, I had one of my team members in DataBank send us a phishing message that said, hey, look at, take a look at this. This is not something that I believe is correct. And that's because we've implemented and instituted a culture of change, a culture of training and awareness within the systems or within the organization. So next step down is to harden your systems, because a lot of these systems, when they are not hardened, will be taken advantage of by simple tactics and tools of the attacker. For example, if you have a web, or if you have a database server, is there really a need to have a web server running on the web server software itself running on the database server? The answer to that is probably no. You really should architect that so they are two separate systems and one is different from the other. A lot of people forget to harden their workstations as well. Not everybody needs to have administrator access to their workstations, and even those that do have access to the workstations from an administrator perspective should use an alternative account in order to elevate their privileges during the time that they need to use that only. This will prevent certain types of malware and other executable code and scripting from taking effect on those workstations. So harden both your servers and your workstations. And that really ties into the role-based access control, or RBAC function as well, that I just talked about. Not everybody needs the administrator access, and those that do should only use it under particular situations and times. Another key factor that I've seen in my own role as CISO here at DataBank is that when people don't patch, they are going to get attacked. And one of the things that we've been seeing over the past couple of months with COVID, not only with our own customers, but out in the field, if you will, as well, is that their minds and their situations are diverted from their continuous monitoring exercises, the things that they normally do from a good hygiene perspective. And one of the things that they've laxed on is patching. Some people have deliberately taken the stance of not patching because they may not be in the office and they're concerned that a patch may cause a server to go down or a system to go down. That's okay, but make sure that you continually review that risk and understand the ramifications of not patching, especially long term. Here we are now 3 months or 4 months into the COVID-19 away from the office type of scenario. So make sure that you continually patch, because the attacks will occur. People are taking advantage of weak and unpatched systems. And as Anthony well communicated, backup and replication of backups is absolutely a must and important. As I said at the beginning of this slide, I have seen the difference myself. I have seen the difference between those people that are prepared and those people that are unprepared. And part of being prepared is having your backups. Those people that were prepared and had backups were able to return to operation literally within hours, and sometimes even minutes, whenever their systems were impacted by a ransomware situation, versus those other people who were unprepared and did not have backups. I have literally watched their companies fall apart, or portions of their company and their business fall apart because they no longer had the data that was on the servers that were impacted by the ransomware situation. Continuous monitoring is key to the entire thing. As I talked about during patching, there are times when you might throttle back, if you will, that continuous monitoring because of other situations going on. But if you are not continuously watching your systems and making sure that they are patched and making sure all the other security monitoring functions are operating correctly and you're getting the alerts that you need, you will have someone sneak in under the radar and get you. So continuous monitoring is the key to moving forward. So what happens if you are infected? So you're infected now, what do you do? Let's say you had your good incident response plan. You know, the first thing you need to understand is that unfortunately, even the best security situations, the most secure situations, are going to be attacked at some point, and sometimes even successfully. That is not a failure necessarily if you're attacked and successfully attacked. But it is important to prepare before that event so that you can recover quickly and operate. So a couple of key things for what happens when you're infected is that you need to communicate both internally and externally to your stakeholders. You need to make sure that internally your teams are aware, you know, through their training and awareness type of situation, what their role is in the process. The last thing you need is you do not need a rank and file member of your organization getting on the phone and answering the phone, shall I say, and a customer or potential customer asking them to do something, and that company member, all in good faith, saying, "I'm sorry, I can't do anything right now because we've been attacked by ransomware." There needs to be a clear and a concise message of what is happening. You need to make sure that you're also protecting your organization within within proper ethical boundaries. So for example, communicating that you're having a security incident versus a ransomware situation is very appropriate during the initial discovery and the initial containment and even the stabilization phases of an incident response plan. And then later on, releasing the details that are necessary. Make sure that you're also communicating appropriately with your external stakeholders or customers, because there may be some situations where you, by communicating early and communicating clearly, you could prevent their environments from being impacted. Many people, especially in a cloud service type of environment, they will connect to their servers up in the cloud. I've had situations where offices have been impacted by ransomware, and the organization that was impacted did not share that information with DataBank early enough, and therefore their cloud services were also impacted because the ransomware transferred up to the cloud. So make sure that you communicate with your cloud service or co-location service partner so that they can help you protect your environments. Make sure that external communication piece is significant there. On the recovery side, you have some choices. Payment is obviously one choice, but every solution out there has its problems and its concerns, and payment is probably the one on the top of the list for me that has some significant problems and concerns. Historically, we have seen that payment for ransomware has resulted in not 100% of the data being restored, more around the 80% range. It has also resulted in the company's name who made the payment being placed on dark web and other types of situations that expose the fact that they made the payment so that other ransomware attacks will come in. Typically, these ransomware attacks that come in will happen 10 to 12 months later after you've been attacked, because they know that shortly after the attack and after you've paid the ransom to get your data back, you're going to go through a whole process, including security consultants and otherwise, to tighten your environment. But 10 to 12 months later, you get situations where you're starting to get lax again and potentially become vulnerable. So payment only exposes you more from my perspective. Restoring from backup, you're restoring from backup and a previous clean backup, as I've expressed earlier, has identified that you can get back online much quicker. And failing over to a second site or using replicated systems is also an important consideration for you. If you can afford to have a secondary DR set, then please certainly consider that. Okay. Importance of testing and documentation is key here. When you've been infected, your testing and your documentation will show how effective you are at restoring. So we've talked about that a few moments ago. You can't just have a plan, but you have to test that so that your key stakeholders within the plan know how to operate and know how to work. Watch out for the ransomware type of situation from being a diversion from an actual, a different kind of attack. Lots of times DDoS and ransomware types of situations are diversions from data exfiltration that is ongoing. In fact, lots of times ransomware is used to cover up a data exfiltration. Data exfiltration meaning that the attacker has already gained access to your data, they've moved it off or are in the process of moving it off of your systems, and in order to cover up all their steps and prevent a forensic investigation from adequately identifying the attacker, they will do a ransomware type of attack to cover up all those tracks and traces, if you will. Another key factor in recovering and being in good standing, if you will, during an infection is at the end of all this, conducting a root cause analysis. It is absolutely important to understand how the attacker got in, what they gained access to, and the impact that they made so that you can fix that going forward and not have additional problems that may occur. So after you've been affected, part of that root cause analysis will be, what have we learned from this? What are the lessons that we learned? All right, so some of the lessons that we learned is that, that an incident response plan is key. An incident response plan, again, is not an absolute guide or an absolute script for you to go on. It is simply a guide for you during that process. It will identify who your key stakeholders are, how to contact them, and what phases you're in. Backups are essential to recovery. Because if you don't have the backups and something does get encrypted, then you are left with two choices, either to completely shut down and rebuild that portion of your business and that portion of your data, or to pay the ransom. And every time you remove options that are in front of you, you're creating risk and removing potential recovery capabilities. Continuous monitoring is a preventative tool. The more alerts that you have, the more data that you have coming in, as long as it's not overwhelming to you, the more opportunity you will see a possible attack occur. Recovery is possible. That's something you must understand. We will have a situation where if you have things planned properly, you will be able to recover from this. So it's never too soon, or it's only too late. You need to start now, today, doing incident response recovery type of situations. All right, so DataBank solutions for you to get through these types of problems. Where can we go for help? You've already seen Anthony provided some of the situations, some of the places that you can go for help. DataBank is an option for you to come and talk to us in a consultative manner. That will allow you to hear from our experts that are on staff, our security team, not just me, but I have 7 other security professionals on my team that have dealt with this, that can guide you through how to create your plans and set things up. You should look at having a forensic team and a forensic investigator on retainer, the same manner you have a lawyer on retainer. It's almost essential in this day and age in order to fully recover from these types of situations, understand exactly the impact of your data breach, of having forensics investigators on retainer. Always have a multi-layered security approach, because the more layers you have, it's harder for them to break in, the attackers, but it's also more layers that will allow us to detect and prevent a situation like that. Make sure you do your backups, like we've talked very extensively on this webinar, and that you can and make sure you have your systems patched. So what does a multi-layer security approach look like at DataBank? You can see here that we have 5 layers that we apply. All of our customers get physical security controls in place that you might expect in a high security type of environment, like closed circuit television and facilities that are staffed 24/7 with security personnel, security guard types of personnel. As you move through our options from co-location to infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, the types of security controls that you get increase. So as an infrastructure as a service type of environment, you get network perimeter controls. You move on to system host controls and access controls as well, depending on how much of the control overall that you want to give to DataBank for their security. But everyone gets the continuous monitoring function, which is the heart of what we need to do as security professionals and businesses to ensure that we are detecting and preventing these types of things from happening. And when they do, we have the earliest alarms go off so that we can limit the exposure and contain the problem, moving into the stabilization in a much, much quicker manner. All right, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Dane so that he could talk more about some of the data protection solutions and other items that we have at DataBank. Dane?
Well, thank you, Mark. That was very insightful. And I know that you've been dealing with a lot of this sort of thing lately, and kind of an exponential increase in ransomware and ransomware attacks. So great to hear from you. Well, as you might suspect, our data protection solutions need to be implemented in the mitigation phase. In other words, before you get sick, right? But what's listed here and what we're showing here, these are all services that you can use to effectively remediate and recover from when the time comes. What we hear is that all of our clients have similar challenges but different needs based on their environment. And this is why we consult with you to determine what you want and what you need in the context of your budget. budget because, of course, we can't afford to do everything. Now, during that conversation, we take into account many things, including your applications and networks, databases, platforms, and your tolerance for downtime. We have some clients, for instance, that simply need an offsite repository where they can store encrypted data, and that's why we offer DataBank Cloud Connect. As a Veeam user, you're in control of where your offsite backups go, so just choose DataBank when you're in the Veeam console, and your backups will be stored offsite in one of our certified data centers. So you not only know where your backups are, but you know they're safe. Now you choose the retention in the Veeam software, so you can back up anything you want and retain it for as long as you like. DataBank provides the storage and offsite data center. Now in the middle here, and for the clients that need to minimize downtime as much as possible, we offer DRaaS. Disaster Recovery as a Service is much more than backup, which you might need as well. We have clients that use us for both. But DRaaS is more of a replication failover versus backup. So hopefully that makes sense. With Disaster Recovery as a Service, we take snapshots of your virtual machines and replicate those snapshots not only to our data center, but to our infrastructure as a service platform. What you get is an active network, compute, and storage so you can recover your applications in a short period of time. And on the right-hand side here, we have data protection solutions for Office 365. Veeam and DataBank have teamed up for an end-to-end solution. You may not realize it, but if your company uses Office 365, Microsoft only provides very limited backup, and it's your responsibility to back up your data. So if ransomware compromises your environment, you may not be able to recover your email. And of course, if you're a SharePoint user as well, you now have lost all of the essential files that everyone in your company uses to get things done. And that is not a good day. Now, for those of you that don't have the staff or the expertise, I should mention that you'll be able to leverage our experts and our collective experience. Now, since most of us need our systems to be available around the clock, I'd like to dive a little deeper into DRaaS. It's really the way most companies, or at least many companies, are going these days to minimize downtime. As you start to have the conversation internally within your organization, you want to keep these 5 key components in mind. Most importantly, DRaaS provides an executable plan, something that's testable and verifiable, which means we provide an end-to-end solution for recovering applications, not just the data. The components include a data center that's geographically separate from your primary data center, the infrastructure to recover from, the software to make it happen, and the technical resources to execute the plan when and if you can't be there, which of course has been common more recently based on some of the lockdowns and things like that. You choose your recovery time objectives and your recovery point objectives, and we'll help you bring your systems back online. So what do you get? What's included? You get a holistic solution to recover. Notice here that our service includes not only the infrastructure, but the engineering expertise, the implementation, and testing, which are all critical parts of any solution. One note, if I may, is to let you know that we offer revenue portability for our contracts, which means you can apply money spent on DRaaS to other services if your needs do change. So really, in the end, you can't make a mistake with our service. So if you're considering disaster recovery as a service from a service provider like us, and we hope you are, you're in good company. 451 Research reports that adoption of this service will double by 2021, next year. Based on the recent events with COVID-19 and of course the proliferation of ransomware, that percentage might be low. Who knows? But we're definitely trending upward. So you may be asking yourself, you might say self, why would we want to remediate by choosing something as a service? But of course, since most of you are already leveraging cloud services in some way, shape, or form, I'm sure you all understand these because cloud is cloud or as a service is as a service. But if not, we all know that in most cases, as a service is faster, better, and less expensive than the alternative of building your own. The wheel, as we say, has already been built, so there really shouldn't be any need for you to go through the lengthy process of building your own, capitalizing the investment, getting it wrong once or twice before you get it right. It's here today. So paying for what you need and paying as you go just makes sense. So let me wrap up by sharing what we think is a good checklist for you to follow as you socialize this internally. You'll notice that this is really just a summary of what we've been talking about. So what are the healthy habits you should be focusing on? And of course, only you can answer that. But the good news is that we are here to help. We at DataBank are here to help. Which brings me to our exclusive offer. We can help you make good choices and the right choices so you can protect your organization. DataBank isn't just a service provider. We pride ourselves on our consultative approach so our customers can make healthy choices. So for the first 10 respondents each, we're offering mitigation sessions with our own Mark Haupt. And those sessions will focus on process, security, and compliance, which really Mark's areas of expertise. And then remediation sessions, which our sales engineering team will discuss primarily data protection solutions, like the ones that I kind of just went through there. So simply send a note to webinars@databank.com and let us know how we can help. And finally, if you aren't ready to engage with us just yet, we have a white paper we can send you. So if you have questions, now is the time to ask. It looks like we're right at an hour, coming up close to an hour anyway. We've got a few minutes. So if you have questions, please insert those into chat and we'll see if we can I'm reviewing those chat comments right now, and let me get back to you here in a sec.
So Dane, I'll go ahead and address one from listener viewer Sarah. I just put these links into the chat for you, but there was a question about the links or direction to go with the NIST and FedRAMP templates. You can look at the NIST website and look for special publication 800-61. Revision 2, and the link is there in the chat, or you can look at fedramp.gov/templates and select the SSP attachment 6, which is contingency plan. That will help you through this process with a couple of different templates.
Great. Looks like we have another question. Someone said, hey, you mentioned Microsoft in your presentation. Do you also support G Suite? And I'm not aware of one of our solutions that we might be able to adapt to G Suite, but should that, I'll check with our tech folks and see what we might be able to do there to help. All right, well, it looks like I don't see any other questions. Looks like we're right at an hour, pretty close to it. So let's sign off for now. We'd like to thank everyone for attending, and we hope you came away with some useful tips. And as always, be safe, stay secure.